This is a story about $250 million of fraud, billionaire NBA owner, star player, and a journalist who deserves a lot of respect for this story that is sending shockwaves throughout the NBA. Kawhi Leonard, star player in the NBA, one of the probably 10 best in the NBA. Steve Ballmer, you may know him from Microsoft. He's the recent owner of the Los Angeles Clippers, and he wanted to sign Kawhi in 2019 after Kawhi won an NBA title with the Toronto Raptors. He wanted to go back home to LA. Was he going to the Lakers? Was he going to the Clippers? Well, Steve Ballmer offered him a contract, and at the time, some people were reporting that this guy right here, Uncle Dennis, if you're an NBA fan, you know the lore. Uncle Dennis was asking for some benefits outside of the contract that Kawhi was going to sign with the team he was going to. Well, he ended up signing with the Clippers. Ballmer got his big win. Kawhi's going back home. A beautiful story, right? Well, we're finding out that there may be some smoke behind the scenes of Kawhi receiving benefits that would make it cheating.
Named Andre Czerny and Joe Sandberg, who successfully raised hundreds of millions of dollars with the help of some of the most famous people in the entire world. Because Andre and Joe co-founded a company that they named Aspiration.
Beautiful name, right? It is led by this guy, Joe Sandberg, and you may have heard of him if you spend any time on the Department of Justice website. That's right, Orange County man and Aspiration Partners co-founder agrees to plead guilty to $248 million scheme. Think of that. You've probably never heard of it, but it's $250 million. He was the co-founder of this company back a few years ago, 2020, 2021. Instead of PPP loan frauds like some of those fake gurus, they were going after the big dogs. They were going for $145 million in loans. The losses ended up being $248 million. More on that in a minute. Let's check out the next clip from Pablo's podcast.
Is that on that list of creditors, up near the top, above the Boston Red Sox, is an LLC, a tiny little company that Aspiration owes $7 million. And that LLC's name, David, is what?
A KL2 Aspire LLC.
Sounds like Kawhi's, doesn't it? So I made you a little chart right here so that you can understand it. Basically, the Clippers, professional NBA organization, they pay the player. Here's just a handful of the players and their salaries for this upcoming year. You can see that they make a lot of money, but it's not enough. Who needs, inflation and have you seen the housing prices in LA? You need to be making $50 million a year to make it. Well, the problem is in the NBA, there's what's called a max contract. And so certain players, to the level of Kawhi Leonard's ability, he can only sign for a maximum amount of money. So you may be thinking, are there ways around this? Well, that's what a guy like Steve Ballmer's thinking. He's like, I want to pay him more because I want to entice him to come to the Clippers. Are there ways to send him more money? This, by the way, this is cheating. This is very, very bad. That's why this story is blowing up, because there's belief, we'll see in a minute, there's belief that Steve Ballmer found a way to give Kawhi an extra $28 million on top of his salary.
Because there's a salary cap for a reason. That's been collectively bargained. And what you have to do for a level playing field is you cannot have any circumvention of that cap. So you're not allowed to give players anything. It all counts. So you can't give them plane tickets. You can't pay the college education of their brothers, sisters, friends.
Basically, if Pablo was able to expose, which through his documents, and go please watch the podcast, he has plenty of evidence. If he's able to find out and the league finds out that Steve Ballmer found a way to send $28 million to a star player to sign him, to entice him to come to his team, that takes the integrity of the entire NBA into question. This is a massive, massive scandal, probably one of the 5 biggest in NBA history, in my opinion. Maybe others don't share that, but I think this is one of the 3 or 5 biggest stories in the NBA. That's why I'm so excited to see what happens and see how this plays out, because you're also dealing with Steve Ballmer, like a mega billionaire. Why do you feel the need to cheat to do this? Well, he wants to compete with the Lakers, wants to compete for NBA championships, and so he's willing to possibly cheat. Here's Adam Silver. He didn't say this quote, but cap circumvention is a serious issue because it ruins the integrity of the league. If you find out that a team was cheating, not just like a small little cheating here and there, like, oh, Bill Belichick might be filming practices, like little cheating like that, whatever, we can kind of overlook that as fans. Everyone's looking for a competitive advantage. This is way, 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 way bigger. This is possibly signing a star athlete in a sport where the stars drive the sport. The stars are significantly more valuable to teams than in other sports, just because at one time you only have 5 players on the court. So if you have the best player on the court, you have a major advantage, major competitive advantage. If you take away that competitive equality, You have massive issues in the league. And Adam Silver, the NBA just signed a massive TV deal. They have recently. You had some of these players are getting popped for gambling in the games. So you have gambling in the games. The owners possibly circumventing the rules and the cap to possibly get around the rule structure so that they can sign players. This is a massive issue, and Adam Silver's probably not going to sleep tonight. He needs to get on top of this. And it looks like they will be. NBA says it will open investigation into the report about his endorsement deal. This was released yesterday. Pablo Torre getting some credit in the article. It would be really interesting to see if Adam Silver reaches out to Pablo, because the evidence in his podcast, if you watch it, you will see that it is very, very convincing. And Steve Ballmer felt the need. The Clippers came out with a post or a statement, an official statement, basically saying there was no wrongdoing, there was market manipulation, Steve was defrauded. This guy, Joseph Sandberg's the bad guy, recently pleaded guilty to millions of dollars in fraud, and it's just unfortunate Steve got scammed, essentially, and there's nothing unusual or untoward about team sponsors doing endorsement deals with players on the same team. Well, there's a major problem that I haven't shared yet, and that is that Kawhi Leonard didn't have to show up. He signed a $28 million deal with this company, Aspiration, that plants trees and is good for the environment. He didn't have to do anything, which we'll talk about in a second. So why would a company endorse a player or pay a player to endorse their company if there's no value exchange? You're paying a guy $28 million, and at no point did Kawhi Leonard do any posts. He never openly endorsed them. He never wore their outfits or merchandise or anything to show that there was a relationship. And so why would the company give a player $28 million when there was no value exchange? And so sure, Steve Ballmer might have been scammed, and he probably was. He invested in a company, as does he probably does. He does that many times. So $50 million to him, not a lot of money, just a small little amount for a startup. So yeah, he probably got scammed, but this statement doesn't answer the question or our interest in why did you send them money, and then why did they send money to Kawhi Leonard that just magically was like, there was another news report that just came out that now they're saying it possibly was around $50 million that was scheduled to go to Kawhi Leonard, but he magically gave $50 million in venture capital. So why is this all very coincidental? Mark Cuban decided to chime in with his own tweet, basically saying, I'm on Team Ballmer. As much as I wish they circumvented the salary cap, Steve isn't that dumb. There's no way he would do this. He has way too much to risk. They got scammed by Aspiration. He was a victim of this whole thing. Scammers do scammy things. They did a $300 million sponsorship deal. It's a huge deal. And look, the better the team does, the more value the sponsorship has. Everything he says is accurate. What Mark isn't talking about here, and was kind of disappointed about this post from Mark, is that he doesn't address any of the things that Pablo brought up. And he even says it's sad that he didn't take the time to find out how these scammers pulled off their scam. Pablo, according to him, spent 7 months research. He had like 7 employees, former employees of Aspiration, reach out. He has all the documentation. It was a very convincing video. And Mark doesn't address the thing that matters most. Why was Kawhi paid to do nothing? See, if Kawhi was out endorsing the product, and maybe you could say the market value was $20 million, not $28 million, and we can argue about maybe there's an $8 million excess. Why did he get paid a little more than market value? Fine. This isn't that. This is Kawhi Leonard was in contract to get paid $28 million, and he didn't do anything. And as we'll see, I think in the next post, coming up in a post, he not only didn't do anything, but even in the contract, it was such a minimal amount of work that no reasonable person would say that he was getting paid fairly, a fair amount. This was not a market rate. And so Mark never even addressed that, which I was really disappointed by, because maybe he is on team owner, because just maybe in the past, Dirk Nowitzki, wink, wink, Dirk Nowitzki had some ups and downs with the salary where a couple years he got paid a little less. Maybe was there some backdoor deals? Not accusing him of anything, but maybe this goes on more than we think. I just saw on Twitter a post that Steve Ballmer sits down with Ramona Shelburne. It's going to be coming out. So when you watch this video, it'll be out. You're really curious to see what he has to say. I am disappointed that he went on ESPN, this is going to be a fluff piece. This is going to be some pretty simple questions. I mean, I'm sure Ramona's respected. I'm sure she's going to ask some tough questions, but Steve's not sitting there with any proof. I don't see any documents. I don't see any computers. He's going to be asked tough questions. He's going to say, look, I'm a victim too. I didn't know these guys were defrauding. The deal between them and Kawhi was none of my business. I imagine, I'm willing to bet money that he's not going to answer the most important thing, which is, why did this company that was in partnership with your team, why did you invest in the company? And all the dates are lining up such that Kawhi was paid this extra money because he wasn't able to sign like the Supermax deal or whatever. Why is all of this super coincidental? He's going to have to answer that.
He has to be available, Kawhi does, for $28 million to participate in 5 organic comments, which could be a like or a retweet.
You may wonder how many likes and retweets did he give?
Is it 0?
Of course it's 0.
Oh, my God.
He did nothing. He literally did nothing.
What makes this podcast so great is Pablo gave them all the evidence in real time, so you're getting their real reaction. If you watch the video, the amount of stuff that Kawhi had to do for $28 million is insane. Like, for those not on social media, 5 retweets or comments is very minimal, about as minimal as it gets. They also have a clip of him in the contract. He had to sign 50 items. This guy used to be the Miami Marlins president and said that it's generally 1,500 or more in a standard contract, and certainly not for $28 million. So basically, in a nutshell, Kawhi Leonard was getting paid many multiples above market rate for this type of deal, many 100% more than he should have been paid, and the effort he gave was embarrassing. He got paid and did nothing. Here's a news article from September 2021. LA Clippers signed $300 million plus arena sponsorship deal with Green Bank Aspiration. They were spending a lot of money on marketing. So you're probably wondering, what in the world do they even do? They got a few celebrities, Steve Ballmer, to give them money, basically invest in their company. They charged $1 for one tree, and then they'd link up with a company to go and plant the trees. They were planting them at about 10 to 20 cents. So Aspiration essentially became a tree broker. They have a longer history. It doesn't really matter in this video. They pivoted to become this carbon charter credit thing. And if you know anything about Hollywood, it seems like it's very easy to raise money if you just say you're saving the world on climate change. It's like what AI is right now. Just add in climate change. We're saving the world. And all the celebrities bend over backwards and it'll give you millions of dollars. And I put Drake in there because Drake was one of the investors. And he's back to podcasting. He's plant seeds in other ways. But that is the story of Aspiration. I found some interesting lawsuits, and since we cover those on the channel, I figured I'd run through them real quick. So this is a company, the SSKS LLC, Sunshine Sachs. Basically, they're a PR firm that looks like Aspiration Partners hired, and here's a $62,000 judgment. It looks like services were rendered, and Aspiration never paid, so it's a little over $61,000. I looked them up, and it looks like they are like a PR firm that helps get your business name out there, get you some press. Here's a judgment from Eden Reforestation Projects. In my basic level of research into this, it sounds like they were the company actually planting the trees. So here's a judgment. I don't need to read it. You can go and read it if you really care to read it. But essentially $2.5 million judgment. Sounds like they did some work. They never got paid. Which, by the way, sometimes it seems so glorious to run a big business and all that, but you still deal with bullshit too. I mean, imagine doing $2.5 million worth of services, and these guys are talking about, we have hundreds of millions of dollars in startup capital, and our company's worth, there was a news article, we're doing a SPAC deal it's valuing the company at $2.3 billion, and they're doing services. They probably thought they had the money, so they did $2.5 million worth of services and never got paid. Next, the Outfront Media. I think these are the billboards that you see in your town. If you live in a big city, you probably, if you look at the bottom, you'll see Outfront Media. They sued Aspiration, Financial and Aspiration Partners for services rendered that weren't paid for. This one's over $1 million as well. I think it came out to $1.1 million. What I found really interesting as well when you read lawsuits is the exhibits. You see some really fun evidence. I hope you guys enjoy this as much as I do. I think it's really fun to see like the actual contracts. And so Outfront Media, this is if you're interested in billboards, they had billboards all around the country. Here's about a month's worth in Denver for over 14 grand. If I scroll down a bit, you can get into New York. They have a few different. Yeah, here's one. New York, $18,500. So if you ever wondered, if you're driving down the interstate and you're wondering how much people pay for billboards, this was just a couple years ago in New York, of course, and we don't know exactly where it is, but 18 grand. There's a few. Here's a couple, 60 grand, 67, 33,000. This is bus exteriors. So imagine how much, if you see someone all around town, you probably, personal injury lawyers here in Las Vegas, they're everywhere. Hundreds of thousands of dollars a month in advertising. Here's an article in Forbes about Joe Sandberg. This is the fraudster that was the co-founder of the Aspiration Group that I'm sure Steve Ballmer is going to say, oh, I got fooled by this guy. And the interesting paragraph in this story is him and his business partner, this Al Husseini guy. They falsely inflated this Al Husseini's net worth. They hired a Lebanese graphic designer for mock fidelity brokerage accounts. Essentially what happened is the Sandberg guy wanted to go out and get a bunch of loans. He has this company. He's got shares in this private company and says, I want a $150 million loan. I'm willing to back it with shares of this private company. And the lender says, that's not good enough. So knowing that, he would need to get some help, basically better collateral, he would go to this Al Husseini guy who was on the board with Aspiration, and Al Husseini said, hey, I got the money, look at these documents. So this Lebanese graphic designer forged that Al Husseini apparently had $86 million worth of securities when the actual sum was less than $4,400. A phony bank account statement claimed he had $25 million in cash. Big baller, right? When it was really just 40 grand. And in November 2021, to back the larger loan, he sent a fake brokerage account saying he owed $199 million in securities. So here's this wealthy man willing to back the loan. The problem is when Sandberg eventually defaulted and the lender went after Al Husseini, they found out real quick that he didn't have the money. I was able to find the lawsuit. Clover Lending Company, and Ibrahim Al Husseini is the individual I just spoke about, and then Faisal is his brother. And this complaint basically explains what I just talked about. And here's the loan was $75 million. One of the loans, he eventually owned, the Sandberg guy eventually owed $170 million. And so the borrower ended up defaulting on its loan obligations by failing to make a $17 million repayment. October of 2022. At the time, the borrower owed more than $180 million. So the real big important part of this complaint is that Ibrahim owed money, and right around when he was supposed to pay, in March 2023, he loaned a Saudi Arabian corporation $300 million, and then he sold his real estate in Los Angeles worth about $5 million, knowing that a judgment was coming and they'd be able to seize that asset. What I find really interesting, I wasn't able to find it out, and maybe Pablo can find this or whoever dives deep into this. This guy worked or was a co-founder on the board of Aspiration. They raised all this money, $300 million, $500 million, $1 billion. And then all of a sudden, this guy has access to $300 million. He needed to forge documents. He had like 40 grand in cash. He needed to forge documents to back up this loan over here. But then over here, he's lending $300 million to a Saudi Arabian corporation. Don't you find it interesting that they happen to raise like $350 million and then all of a sudden he's able to loan $300 million? I find that part very peculiar. And ultimately what happened is they claim that the $300 million was all of his assets. $300 million is a lot of money. I would imagine that's all of his assets. And something went wrong with the Saudi loan, and he became insolvent as a result, and then he couldn't pay his the loan with Clover, which he said he had the assets for, and they found out, nope, he actually doesn't. I'm going to end right here. It looks like Mark Cuban jumped on the podcast with Pablo to discuss this story. I'm fascinated to see what he has to say. I imagine he's going to defend Steve and say Steve probably had no idea. This type of stuff happens all the time. And I really hope, fingers crossed, I really hope that he goes on there and exposes other owners now that he's not in the ownership group in the NBA. How cool would it be if he just goes, oh yeah, I have some dirt. Here, I'm going to share it with you. How wild would that be? Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.